A new survey finds Hong Kong's competitiveness falling. Snowden urges Obama to stop spying on Americans. And Syria, one of the focuses of this year's G8 summit.
Good evening. A survey conducted by scholars in Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan, and the mainland has found Hong Kong's competitiveness falling when compared with other parts of China. It fell from second place last year to fifth place. Researchers say the city should find new ways to spur economic growth. Joel De Silva reports.
The survey conducted by the China Institute of City Competitiveness looked at the economies, financial markets, trade, technological development and human resources of 34 cities and regions around China. Guangdong, Jiangsu and Shandong provinces are in the lead. Hong Kong fell from second place last year to the fifth. The researchers say Hong Kong is being challenged by nearby cities. Its position as a cargo container handling hub is also under threat.
04年以后
Chairman of the Institute Gui Changfeng says Shanghai has been a major challenge against Hong Kong since 2004. But then port facilities in Shenzhen have also caught up. As for the most trustworthy cities, Hong Kong is number 3 behind Macau and Taipei. Hong Kong is also rated as the 10th best city to live in around China. The researchers say this reflects people's sense of belonging and satisfaction with their hometowns and cities. As for which cities are the happiest, Hong Kong came 16th. Hong Kong is out of the top 10 for the most efficient government, the best investment environment and quality of life. But it is number 1 for creating wealth. The Institute said increasing conflict within Hong Kong society is weakening the city's competitive edge. They warned that Hong Kong cannot rest on its laurels and must find new ways to encourage economic growth. The China Institute of City Competitiveness was established in Hong Kong in 1998. It is composed of Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan and mainland scholars whose research focuses on finding ways to boost competitiveness across the Greater China region. Joel De Silva, TVB News.
How to resolve the conflict in Syria was the main topic of discussion as a two-day summit of the G8 got underway yesterday. And as Alan Buchnia reports, Russian President Vladimir Putin faces further isolation later today as world leaders pressure him to tone down his support for the Syrian government.
The divisions over Syria dominated the atmosphere as leaders of the Group of 8 industrial nations met in Northern Ireland, a place once rocked by decades of violence, but which Britain now wants to showcase as a model of conflict resolution. Following a 2-hour meeting, U.S. President Barack Obama and Russian President Vladimir Putin looked clearly uncomfortable as they addressed reporters about their discussions.
With respect to Syria, we do have differing perspectives on the problem, but we share an interest in reducing the violence, securing chemical weapons, ensuring that they're neither used nor are they subject to proliferation, and that we want to try to resolve the issue through political means if possible.
The U.S. said last week it would provide military aid to the rebels in Syria, something other G8 leaders have been reluctant to do. Obama also announced the U.S. would provide more than $3 billion in humanitarian aid to address the Syrian crisis. Putin, meanwhile, had earlier described the rebels as cannibals who eat human flesh and warned of giving arms to them. He said that while the leaders' opinions don't coincide, Russia would push for the parties to negotiate. If the G8 leaders cannot reach a consensus, it is possible a final statement at the end of the summit will be released without input from Russia. Also being discussed at the summit is a $100 billion a year free trade pact between the United States and European Union.
Everyone knows these trade deals are difficult. Some take years to get off the ground and some never happen at all. So it's a testament to the leadership and the political will of everyone here that we've reached this point. This is a once-in-a-generation prize, and we are determined to to seize it.
The leaders have set a tight deadline on the massive deal, hoping to have it in place by the end of 2014. Alan Booknia, TVB News.
In an online forum run by the Guardian newspaper, NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden said being called a traitor by the likes of former U.S. Vice President Dick Cheney is the highest honor. He also claims he had not given any of his leaks to the Chinese, but he did urge President Barack Obama to return to sanity and stop spying on Americans.
When you see
Edward Snowden subjected himself to a question and answer forum in an effort to expose what he described as the largest program of suspicionless surveillance in human history. When asked if he's given any of his leaked information to the Chinese government, he maintained he's had no communication with Beijing. Asked about what triggered his decision to blow the lid off the NSA's secret surveillance programs, Snowden said it was witnessing the litany of lies from members of Congress who sanctioned the lies. He also characterized James Clapper, the director of national intelligence, as a man whose lies are evidence of a subverted democracy. Also in the Q&A session, Snowden urged President Obama to return to sanity and set an example of transparency by stopping the machines that spy on Americans. While making his media rounds, Obama reminded Snowden that after 9/11, Americans walk a fine line between privacy rights and national security. He also assured U.S. citizens that the NSA does not listen to their phone calls or target their emails.
They cannot and have not, by law and by rule, and unless they, and usually it wouldn't be they, it would be the FBI, go to a court and obtain a warrant.
The Justice Department is now investigating Snowden as a criminal for revealing the very secrets he agreed to keep while being handsomely paid to do so. Obama explains that after 9/11, methodical surveillance is critical to thwarting as many future terror plots as possible.
What I've said, and I continue to believe, is that we don't have to sacrifice our freedom in order to achieve security. That's a false choice. That doesn't mean that there are not trade-offs involved in any given program, any given action that we take.
To that, Snowden says the media should demand to know exactly how many plots were stopped due to surveillance. The NSA plans to answer that very question for Congress later today to divulge they have, in fact, stopped 24 attacks.
And speaking of Snowden, a man who loudly ranted about national security, the CIA, and international spying while on a flight from Hong Kong to the U.S. yesterday caused passengers to tackle him and bind his hands and feet. After United Airlines Flight 116 landed at Newark International Airport, passengers watched on as the FBI escorted the man away. About 9 hours into the 15-hour flight, the man began screaming about being killed and being afraid of the FBI. Right after asking for the flight to be diverted to Canada, he claimed everyone on board was being poisoned. Once he began reaching for his pockets, passengers wrestled him to the floor and then restrained him to a seat. The man also claimed to have information about Edward Snowden and was being taken to a safe house never to be seen again. The man was not identified, but passengers described him as American.
Afghanistan is to hold formal talks with the Taliban in Qatar soon. This from Afghan President Hamid Karzai today during a speech marking the final handover of security from a NATO-led international military coalition to Afghan forces. The talks will be the first significant step forward in attempts to reach a ceasefire in the country's 12-year-old war. Afghan and international officials attended a ceremony in Kabul to mark the security handover of the final batch of provinces to Afghan control. Those areas in the country's southeast and east are some of the country's most unstable regions. NATO's Secretary General said the main effort of international forces will shift from combat to support. He added the aim is to train, advise, and assist Afghan forces. There are, however, no signs of improving security in Afghanistan. Shortly before the handover ceremony, a bomb blast targeting a senior Shia Muslim cleric killed at least 3 civilians and wounded 21 others. The cleric escaped unhurt. Iran's newly elected president has pledged to follow a path of moderation and promised greater openness over the country's nuclear program. Hassan Rouhani, however, did side with the hardline Islamic establishment, refusing to consider halting the country's uranium enrichment. But Rouhani's overall tone in his first post-election news conference is likely to be viewed by the West as evidence of new possibilities for dialogue to ease tensions. He repeated past statements from Iran's leadership that one-on-one talks with Washington are only possible if the U.S. agrees not to interfere in Iranian affairs.
Turkish labor groups fanned a wave of defiance against the government Monday, staging one-day strikes and leading rallies across the country. Thousands of striking unionists took to the streets in Istanbul in sympathy with anti-government protesters. But as they tried to make their way to Gezi Park near Taksim Square, they were repelled by riot police who fired rubber bullets to disperse the crowd. The demonstrations once again lasted well into the night, but police occupying Taksim Square prevented demonstrators from entering. That's where a police crackdown on a peaceful demonstration back on May 31st sparked massive anti-government protests across the country. As part of its quest to find new energy sources and rare earth metals, the Chinese manned submersible Jiaolong has adopted the help of a scientist. Now on board is scientist Zhao Huaiyang. He's a professor of deep sea studies from the School of Ocean and Earth Science of Tongji University. During the second diving operation on its current mission today, Jiaolong carried out long baseline tests. Once finished, the move will widen the scale of Jiaolong's activities in the deep ocean. The long baseline acoustic positioning system can locate the Jiaolong submersible in a web-shaped scale. It will be more helpful for Jiaolong compared with the ultra-short baseline positioning system. And still ahead in our newscast, Customs seized $1.5 million worth of cannabis resin. Villagers try to stop Saiwan from being included in a country park, and the number of Chinese white dolphins said to be a 10-year low.
Sometimes we don't get a choice.
Is there something you're not telling me?
What do you mean?
I'm anxious to make Lady Mary happy. I'd like to know more about her interests.
You wanted her to spy on me?
Be extra work, but I'm happy to pay.
Tonight, Downton Abbey at 8:30 on Pearl.
自細雅培就陪住我成長，優質嘅營養配方成就咗今日嘅我。而家我都要俾 BB 最好嘅。
全新雅培 IQ 導有 IntelliPro 研究指出，不含棕櫚油配方有助吸收重要營養，幫 BB 全面發展。
因為我用過，所以我都有信心俾 BB 用。
美國雅培，美國銷量No.1。
In my country, the investment landscape changes continually. At Franklin Templeton, we've been here for decades to see it firsthand.
Our investment insights start on the ground, with local analysts spotting opportunities and risks as they emerge.
When opportunity grows in your backyard, you can see first what others see eventually.
Invest through the eyes of hundreds of local experts worldwide. Franklin Templeton Investments. Gain from our perspective.
Why are we so good at Japanese?
Because we are students of Nikkei.
Nikkei's Japanese